Hello, dear friends. Patrick here again. We are covering chapter 3 today in Richard Dawkins' book called Outgrowing God, A Beginner's Guide. This is a book targeted at young people or adolescents, and it's a book to try and get them to embrace atheism. So chapter 3 is called Myths and How They Start. I'm just going to go through the notes that I took on this, starting on page 48. As I mentioned already, this is a book targeted at young people, and I notice how he says here on page 48 that how he says biblical scholars don't take this seriously, right? He said here the Old Testament is even more myth, and now you'll notice in this chapter that he repeats the word myth many times. He keeps repeating it over and over and over again. He wants to hypnotize the reader. If you've read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, the method of repeating a specific word, an anchor word, in many different sentences is a method to try and hypnotize the reader into accepting that term. So he repeats the word myth over and over and over again. You'll see that. And he says, biblical scholars don't take the Old Testament seriously as history. He doesn't say which scholars, he just says in general scholars. And he does use the term scholar. If you notice how on page 50, again, he uses the term scholar. And don't forget that we're targeting young people here. And what do you think, let's see if I can find the use of the term scholar again here on page 50. Oh, there's an airplane flying over or something over there. Here we go. He says, no serious scholar thinks he did. He said, Moses is traditionally supposed to have written these first 5 books of the Old Testament. Is called the Pentateuch by Christians and the Torah by Jews. And he says Moses is traditionally supposed to have written them, but no serious scholar thinks he did. Now, he just makes that term up. He doesn't say which scholars. There's a lot of scholars that would believe that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, but he doesn't mention any of those. He just says there's no serious scholar. And this is type of gaslighting, type of browbeating in the academic realm. But think about also the term scholar. I would think more so also in British society, you want to be, as a young person, on what's called the scholars list. And it's often a very strong compliment for a young lad to say, isn't he a great scholar? And so what Dawkins is doing here is telling young people, listen, if you want to be a scholar, if you want to be a serious scholar, if you want to be on the scholars list, you don't believe that Moses wrote these books. You don't take the Old Testament seriously, because no scholars do. You see how subtle he is? He's as subtle as a snake. And so this is his message to young people. If you want to be a scholar, you can't take the Bible seriously. You have to just look at it as a myth. And he goes on to page 52, where he says it never really happened. And he mentions that to different stories about the Egyptians the Israelites escaping from under Egyptian control in the land of Egypt. And he says it's not a pretty story. We could be thankful that it never really happened. Well, there's more evidence coming out that it is very much possible that the Israelites spent time in Egypt. But I'm not going to digress to try and put in any of my own research here. I'll just use what Dawkins is saying himself. And he's very dismissive. He's continually dismissive over and over and over again. And then on page 54 to 55, he tries to bring in the argument of evolution, that if there was a Noah's Ark, it's contrary to evolution because different animals evolved in different places, like there's different animals in Australia and Madagascar. And if there was an ark that took all the animals, then they would have gone out from there. And why do you have these independent animals being created? First of all, I don't think the Bible it conflicts with evolution at all. It says that Adam was made from the dust of the earth, that humans were made from the dust of the earth. And that's exactly in line with what Dawkins always argued, that it had to have come from this single little self-replicating cell, piece of dust, if you want to call it that. And so if God decided to create life from dust, so be it. It's not contrary to the Bible. If there was an ark that a guy built to escape a flood, and he took a bunch of animals with him, it never says that he took all the animals. Obviously he didn't, because there was fish underneath him in the ocean. He didn't have to take fish out, put them in fish bowls, right? There were birds flying around that he didn't have to take. For whatever reason, they could land on the ark, I suppose. But the story is to show God's provision for a righteous person to escape a area that had turned itself over to wickedness, is the message of the story. And whether that was an isolated part of the earth that happened, they say that they find fossils that are similar to those found in ocean things, even on mountaintops, that they say there's geological evidence for a great deluge. But again, I'm not going to go into my own studies from Answers in Genesis or anything like that. I'm only going to use what Dawkins is mentioning in the book. And what he tries to do is he argues that he says because they're separate animals in different parts, that the story of the ark can't be true. There very well could have been a worldwide flood. In fact, NASA did a study on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge that said it was probably caused by an upheaval of water breaking through the surface of the earth at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and they say there could have been a vapor canopy above the earth. But again, I'm digressing. It's hard not to digress when he's talking about stuff that is related to the ark and the great flood. But there's something I will mention that he uses on page 56, so I don't have to go into any external research, where he says that this is his argument for saying that Abraham probably didn't exist. He says because on page 56, where are we here? I'm just going to pull it up for you, see if I can get here. He keeps repeating the word myth over and over again, Jewish myths. And he says, oh, it's just like Robin Hood or Achilles or Knights of the Round Table or Sinbad the Sailor. He brings up all these other stories and says, oh, they're just the same as those. He says the stories of Adam and Eve and of Noah and his ark. He throws in Adam and Eve together with the ark because he just spent a bunch of time saying, oh, the ark can't be true because of evolution. But now he throws in Adam and Eve on top of that. Again, a very subtle way that he inserts his deceptions into his work. The stories of Adam and Eve and of Noah and his ark are not history, and no educated theologian thinks they are. See what he does that again? He always says no expert thinks they are, no reputable scholar thinks they are. Now he says no educated theologian thinks they are. So he's just making all these blanket statements of all these different groups. So if you want to be a respectable person of any sort, an academic, a theologian, a scientist, then you have no respect if you believe in the Bible. And he repeats that over and over and over again, right? There are some theologians that think they're real stories. He just doesn't want to mention them. He says there's nothing wrong with myths. Oh, he kind of, tries to do a judo move again, it's fine, they're just myths. Yeah, and then he compares them to all these other myths, right? Pardon me. And so he says here, if we can find and he repeats this Chinese whispers thing over and over again, just like we would use the term broken telephone. He says, oh, it's just another example of broken telephone, broken telephone, broken telephone. He keeps repeating it over and over again. Then he even says, oh, you could compare it to Brer Rabbit or Superman or Spider-Man. Right? He keeps exaggerating the comparison of the stories in the Bible. He says, oh, it's just like talking about Spider-Man. Come on, that's at the bottom of page 56. And so he says that because camels were not domesticated until 500 to 600 BC, that's when these stories had to have been written, because it said that Abraham had camels. How does he know that camels were not domesticated until then? We're told that Moses wrote these in 3500 to 4000 BC, according to the Bible's own dating, and according to some scholars and some historians and some theological datings. They're way older than what he says, 500, 600 BC. But he needs that time. Do you know why he needs that time? Because he says, oh, look at all these other legends that talked about a flood, and the Bible just copied those legends. No, the Bible is prior to those legends. He tries to turn it around and say, oh, the Bible just copied these ancient stories of a flood, like from the Epic of Gilgamesh, or from these other ancient stories. Well, no, the first 5 books of the Bible are older than the Epic of Gilgamesh. They say, oh, Epic of Gilgamesh is like 5,000 BC. It's way older. No, it isn't. They just made that up. Dawkins just makes it up, and he needs that date to say, oh, these stories are all before the Bible. No, the Bible is the story that was copied. The Bible is the story of the flood, and then these other stories are copying them. You can look it up yourself. But he switches the time around to say that, and his excuse, because camels weren't domesticated until 500 BC. How does he know that? He just throws that out there. They don't know when camels were domesticated. They have no idea. They could have been domesticated 4,000 BC for all they know. How do they know that? How do they know the Egyptians didn't have domesticated camels to do labor for them and work for them? They have no clue. And in fact, it would be highly likely that the Egyptians had domesticated camels, because they look at the stuff they built all kinds of stuff that needed tons of manpower, tons of labor, and it would have been easy for them to domesticate camels. They're like cows. They just do whatever you tell them, basically. And then between pages, I took a number count between pages 56, 57, and even at the top of 58, I believe, 56 and 57, he mentions the word myth 8 times on those 3 pages of this chapter. He repeats it over and over and over and over again. And then he mentions on page 60 The Life of Brian. He says, oh, that's a good movie. You should go see it. Life of Brian is a blasphemous parody made by the Monty Python to make fun of Jesus. He says, oh, that's such a good movie. Yeah, I bet it is for Dawkins, right? He loved people to see that movie. He wants to get children to watch that movie so they can make fun of Jesus. And then he keeps repeating again this Chinese whispers. If he was smart, he would have targeted Western audiences too and used the term broken telephone, but because that term is much more relevant to people in the West, Americans and Canadians and so on. But he keeps using the term Chinese whispers. So that kind of falls a little bit on deaf ears, but the point is still the same. That's all I'm going to mention about chapter 3. The title, of course, of the chapter, Myths and How They Start, it's just a repetition of the word myth over and over and over again. Oh, it's just a myth. It's just a myth. It's just a myth. He doesn't know that the history of the Israelites could be very true, that they found a lot of evidence, archaeological evidence, even in recent years, to support it. He doesn't know that there was a worldwide flood that was originally documented in the Bible and then recounted by other civilizations and at other times in history. He doesn't know that, but he wants to fit it all into his worldview, that his worldview is that the Bible can't be taken at face value at all. Even a slight amount of allegory, he's not too keen on. He wants to just throw the whole thing out, the baby with the bathwater. Is some stories allegories? Absolutely. Of course, there's allegories included in ancient literature. Why wouldn't there be, right? Jesus probably used lots of allegories and parables that may or may not have been based on real events. He's trying to get a point across. The ancient prophets were trying to get a point across, right? They're trying to say, hey, look, if you put your trust in God, you're going to have a good future. If you choose death instead and reject God and refuse to believe that God is real, then you're going to have a hard time. And this is what a lot of these stories explain, that God is on your side. If you'll seek him, if you draw close to him, he'll draw close to you and he'll bless you. He'll bless your life. And that's the point of a lot of the Old Testament stories. But Dawkins doesn't want to have any of that. He just wants to berate anybody that believes in it, put people down that believe in it, say that it's, he goes on and on. Well, you can get the flavor of the book, but of course I don't recommend reading it because it's got no redeeming value to it. All it is a repetition of doubt over and over again. It's not true. No, don't believe that. Just keep repeating it over and over again. So any parent that would give this to a child is destroying the spirit and soul of that child to have any type of faith in God whatsoever, and allowing them to have their faith substituted with something else. Usually it would be a faith in the state. They would usually be turn out to be a communist or some type of evil ideology that they would replace it with. And that's really unfortunate, because that's what the book is targeting. It's targeting young people. So there you go. That's chapter 3, and we will move forward. The next chapter is called The Good Book. So he's talking again. He's going to attack the Bible even further in the following chapter and bring out all these harsh stories that he's going to use to make it sound like the Bible is really terrible and blah, blah, blah. So there you go. I'm sorry to have to keep on top of this topic, but I think it's important to cover, because this is going to be something that's going to affect a lot of people in the future. So thank you for watching once again. God bless you. I love you very much. Take good care of yourself. Enjoy time with people you love, with your family and friends. And don't forget that God loves you very much. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.